What if one decision could unravel the deepest layers of your mind? I'm diving into my 30-day journey of quitting masturbation, a raw, unfiltered experience that exposed my psyche in ways I never expected. Buckle up, because I'm about to lay it all bare. Every psychological twist, triumph, and dark corner of this experiment. I never thought I'd be writing about something this personal, but here I am, spilling my guts about a 30-day challenge that turned into a psychological roller coaster. Quitting masturbation wasn't just about breaking a habit. It was like holding a mirror up to my soul, forcing me to confront parts of myself I'd ignored for years. I'm no monk, and I'm definitely no saint. Just a guy who decided to test his limits and ended up learning more about his mind than he bargained for. Let me take you through the highs, lows, and murky in-betweens of this experience, weaving in the psychology behind it, my personality, my decisions, and how it shook up my life. It all started with a restless night, scrolling through X when I stumbled across posts about NoFap, a movement where people swear off porn and masturbation to reclaim their energy, focus, and mental clarity. The claims were bold: sharper mind, better confidence, even improved relationships. I was skeptical but curious. I'd been stuck in a rut, feeling foggy, unmotivated, and disconnected from my goals. Masturbation wasn't something I thought about much. It was just a habit, a quick escape when stress or boredom hit. But the more I read, the more I wondered, was this holding me back? So I decided to give it a shot. 30 days, no masturbation, no porn, no exceptions. Simple, right? Spoiler, it wasn't. The first few days were surprisingly easy. I was riding the high of a new challenge, like when you start a diet and feel invincible for a week. I replaced the urge with workouts, journaling, and diving into books I'd been meaning to read. Psychologically, this was my brain's reward system, looking for a new dopamine hit. Masturbation, especially when paired with porn, floods your brain with dopamine, a neurotransmitter that makes you feel good but can also make you crave more of the same. By cutting it out, I was forcing my brain to find other sources of pleasure, like the satisfaction of a good sweat or finishing a chapter. It felt empowering, like I was taking control of my impulses. But by day 5, the cracks started to show. The urges hit hard, usually at night when I was alone with my thoughts. It wasn't just physical, it was psychological warfare. My mind would rationalize. One time won't hurt. You're stressed. You deserve it. This is classic cognitive dissonance, when your brain tries to justify breaking a commitment to reduce the tension of sticking to it. I had to get real with myself. Why was I so tempted? Digging deeper, I realized masturbation was my go-to coping mechanism for stress, anxiety, and even boredom. Without it, I was forced to face those feelings head-on, and let me tell you, it was uncomfortable. I started noticing patterns. I'd reach for my phone when I felt overwhelmed. Not just for porn, but for any distraction. Scrolling X, binge-watching shows, anything to avoid sitting with my emotions. From a psychological lens, this is where things get juicy. Masturbation for me was tied to emotional regulation, or rather, the lack of it. According to self-determination theory, humans need autonomy, competence, and relatedness to feel fulfilled. My habit was a crutch when I felt like I was failing in one of those areas. Like when work stressed me out, lack of competence, or when I felt lonely, lack of relatedness. Quitting forced me to confront these gaps. I started journaling to process my emotions, which helped, but it also brought up stuff I buried. like how I'd been avoiding deeper connections with friends because I was too caught up in my own head, or how I'd been using quick fixes like masturbation to dodge bigger questions about my purpose. By week 2, the mental fog started lifting. I felt sharper, more present. Studies on abstinence from porn suggest it can reduce overstimulation of the brain's reward system, letting your dopamine receptors reset. I noticed I wasn't zoning out as much during conversations or procrastinating on tasks. But there was a flip side. I was irritable as hell. My mood swings were wild. One minute I'd feel like a superhero, the next I'd snap at someone over nothing. This is where the psychology of withdrawal comes in. Like any habit, quitting messes with your brain's homeostasis, the balance it's used to. My irritability was my brain throwing a tantrum because it wasn't getting its usual hit. I had to lean into mindfulness techniques like deep breathing and grounding exercises to keep myself in check. Let's talk about my personality, because it played a huge role in this. I'm an INFP on the Myers-Briggs scale: introverted, intuitive, feeling, and perceptive. INFPs are dreamers, driven by values and a need for authenticity, but we can also get stuck in our heads, overthinking everything. My decision to try this challenge came from that idealistic streak. I wanted to be better, to align with some higher version of myself. But my perceptive side, which hates rigid rules, made it tough to stick to the commitment. I'd catch myself bargaining. Maybe I can just watch something light. No harm done. That's where my system of decision-making came in. I lean heavily on intuitive decision-making, guided by my gut and values, but I'm also prone to emotional reasoning, thinking something's true because it feels true. Recognizing this helped me catch myself when I was about to slip. I'd remind myself why I started, not just to quit a habit, but to understand myself better. The darker side of this experience hit around day 15. I started feeling lonely, really lonely. Masturbation had been a private escape, a way to feel good without needing anyone else. Without it, I couldn't ignore the void in my social and romantic life. I'm single, and while I've got a tight-knit family, I don't open up to them much about personal stuff. This challenge forced me to face how isolated I'd let myself become. Psychologically, this ties to attachment theory. I lean toward an avoidant attachment style, craving connection but pulling back when it gets too real. Quitting masturbation stripped away one of my defenses, leaving me raw and vulnerable. I started reaching out to friends more, even had a heart-to-heart with my sister, which was huge for me. But it wasn't all warm fuzzies. I also felt shame, not about the act itself, but about how much I'd relied on it to avoid dealing with my loneliness. The impact on my relationships was mixed. On one hand, I was more present with people. I listened better, laughed more, even flirted a bit at a coffee shop. A big deal for an introvert. But the irritability made me short-tempered at times, especially with my family. I snapped at my mom over something dumb, like her asking me to take out the trash. Later, I realized it wasn't about the trash. It was my brain projecting my frustration onto her. This is called displacement, a defense mechanism where you redirect your emotions onto someone safer than the real source. I apologized, but it was a wake-up call about how my inner turmoil could spill over onto others. By week 3, I hit a turning point. The urges were still there, but they weren't as intense. I built new habits: morning runs, meditation, even cooking meals from scratch. These weren't just distractions. They were ways to channel my energy into something meaningful. Psychologically, this is called sublimation. turning a base impulse into a productive one. I felt proud, like I was reclaiming parts of myself I'd lost to autopilot living. But I also made mistakes. One night, I got too close to the edge, clicking on a suggestive ad on X before catching myself. It wasn't a full relapse, but it felt like a betrayal of my commitment. I beat myself up over it, which led to a spiral of self-criticism. This is where cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT concepts come in handy. I had to challenge my all-or-nothing thinking, telling myself one slit didn't undo my progress. Instead of wallowing, I doubled down on my goal, using the guilt as fuel to stay focused. Let's get real about the science. Masturbation itself isn't inherently bad. Studies show it can reduce stress, improve sleep, even boost mood. But when it becomes compulsive or tied to porn, it can desensitize your brain's reward system, making everyday pleasures feel dull. This is called tolerance, where you need more of the stimulus to get the same high. For me, it wasn't about the act itself but the context, using it as a crutch instead of facing my emotions. Quitting helped me rewire my brain, but it also brought up deeper issues, like my tendency to avoid discomfort. In psychology, this is linked to experiential avoidance, dodging negative feelings instead of processing them. The challenge forced me to sit with my discomfort, which was both painful and liberating. By day 30, I felt different, not like a new person, but a clearer version of myself. My energy was up, my focus was sharper, and I was more intentional with my time. But the biggest win was self-awareness. I learned how much I'd been using quick fixes to avoid hard truths, like how I'd let fear of rejection keep me from pursuing deeper relationships, or how I'd been coasting through life without a clear direction. The challenge didn't magically fix everything, but it gave me a framework to keep growing. I still had urges, and I'm not swearing off masturbation forever. It's a normal part of life for most people. But I'm more mindful now, catching myself when I'm tempted to use it as an escape. Now, let's zoom out to the philosophical side. This experience made me think about free will and the stories we tell ourselves. From an existential perspective, we're all grappling with the tension between our desires and our choices. Quitting masturbation was less about the act and more about asserting control over my narrative. It was about choosing discomfort over numbness, growth over stagnation. Philosophers like Sartre talk about bad faith, living inauthentically by letting habits or excuses define you. This challenge was my way of breaking out of bad faith, of owning my choices even when they were messy or hard. It reminded me that life's meaning isn't found in avoiding pain, but in facing it head-on, with curiosity and courage. In the end, this 30-day experiment wasn't just about quitting a habit. It was a deep dive into my psyche, my values, and my flaws. It showed me how interconnected our habits, emotions, and relationships are, and how much power we have to reshape them. If you're thinking about trying it, don't expect a miracle cure, but be ready for a wild ride through your own mind. It's worth it.